The different thing about Zeus is that he's our final boss. And so more care and more concern needs to go into that because it's going to be what the player remembers when they turn off the game, hoping that they finished it. So it needs to be very epic, very big moments, not really mechanic driven, but something where you finish it and you're like, oh, I need to tell my friend this. Like, oh, did you play him this way? That type of thing.
Not only is he the sort of final boss, but he's also the kind of the main antagonist that if we do a third game, he will kind of stretch into the third.
He was such an iconic figure that to ground Kratos back into Greek mythology, we wanted to make sure that when people looked at him, they knew right away that it was Zeus. They didn't have to guess, they didn't, so it was pretty easy coming up with Zeus.
I definitely didn't want to stray too far from where I think the literature and everybody's sort of traditional perception of where Zeus is at.
Character artist gets the concept art from that department and just sculpts it in polygons and then paints on a texture and tries to make sure that it looks like what the intention was on the part of the producers and the concept artists. We're between concept art and animation in the pipeline. After we're done with it, we end up handing it off to the animators and make sure that it's all correct for what they need and, that he bends correctly and that he moves the way he's supposed to.
We wanted to make it epic in the sense that Kratos is small and Zeus is very big. But we knew we had some problems with that, so we kind of played with scale, bringing Zeus down, making Zeus back to big.
When we started modeling and texturing Zeus, we didn't know that he was going to be a normal-sized guy and then a giant-sized guy. So that ended up adding a little bit of work to the process to make sure that he held up resolution-wise. The fun part is painting the texture on and putting all the wrinkles and stuff in there.
So we have two different models, a big one and a small one. And trying to get the big one to end up in the small space where the player doesn't realize that, they've kind of been tricked that now we're loading up the small one or now we're loading up the big one. So we had to play with various ideas of, we scale him up kind of off camera, but you kind of allude to it that, he's growing. Then when we cut back, you see him, you're like, oh, that happened. So here we have a different model of Zeus, the big one. And then right there, we swap to the small one. And right here, we bring the small one back in.
So using a camera POV change to suggest the...
Right, we have the camera kind of emulate his eyes looking down and shrinking and all that. We didn't want to give him straight melee attacks, so sort of like how the Colossus is like punching at Kratos. We wanted to keep him more magical. So the things that we're working on are attacks that keep his godlike appearance without getting his hands dirty.
They have so much history, and that history kind of unfolds in the horrible things that they do to each other in this fight. So it's a sort of an interesting tying together of all these different elements and really bringing together the actual mythology of all of these gods being completely insecure because of the kind of cyclical nature of overthrowing each other.
The thing that you're going to hopefully remember about Zeus will be not only was the fight very fun, but the fight came to a finale where like, oh, now I see what they were doing and where they're going, and I can't wait for the next one. Usually in the very beginning of how we go about building the game and the creatures, me and Corey and Eric and the rest of us on the combat team will sit down and we'll say, oh, we need these kind of creatures, or, in mythology there was this, what if we took that but kind of put a spin on it so that it behaved this way? And then we'll sit down with the concept artist and we're like, oh, okay, we got this idea, here's these things that we want to get out of the creature. And then the concept artist will come back with like 20 or 30 different ideas, and they're an amazing team. And they'll be like, okay, here's a whole bunch of ideas. What sticks? Kind of like the shotgun approach. And we'll go through. We're like, oh, I wasn't thinking that, but I wasn't thinking this either, and that will really work.
The simplicity of this one, but sort of the personality in the face of this one, getting across that. But I love the skinniness of this guy.
And then from there, we'll sit down with kind of the animators and the character modelers. And we go, okay, here's the personality, here's what we kind of want to get from it. And then we usually try to keep everyone in the loop so that when everyone else is working on their sort of set of creatures, they know what we're doing over here. So that way we don't have too much overlap.
Most of the combat design that myself and the other combat designers do is on the enemy side or the boss's sides. So we come up how the enemy is going to fight Kratos and his unique attributes and his style and what he's going to do. We also come up with like the little tricks or the strategy that you're going to use against this enemy. And then from there, we come up with the animation lists, and we work with the animator, and we go back and forth deciding like how's this guy going to attack, how fast he's going to attack, what types of blocks he's going to use, or whatever strategy it might be. From there, then we go into the code and we start building the character out, get him into the level, get him running, and play around with him, have him fight Kratos, trying to come up with the coolest way to kill him off. From there, it's just revisions over and over. The trick with this guy is he's covering up a little pressure plate. And what you'll need to do is just attack one of his tentacles till he gets stunned. He's going to lift up his tentacle. And now you're going to use that last Spartan, you're going to use his body to hold that pressure plate down. When that does is it opens up a vent, and this is where the Phoenix came from. Now you can use your Icarus wings to fly up in the air, but you got to be careful of the Kraken hitting you down. So you want to use the Icarus wings to fly up, and then you'll get high enough where you can hit the Kraken in the head, and that's where he's actually vulnerable. One of the initial goals that we wanted was to create a puzzle-like boss fight, so it's not just hacking away and beating up somebody and, you know, avoiding their attacks. It's not just simple hack and slash.
Kratos is interacting with the sisters throughout the whole game. You see them as statues, you see them in little sequences. So we knew that when Kratos actually gets up to them and has to fight them, that we wanted to make it a kind of a big event. So first you'll kind of fight her on the ground. She'll kind of hang out over here and dash around and throw these little fireballs at you. From a combat point of view, this was definitely one of the most challenging parts of the game. Well, eventually she basically flies up in the air like this. So you as a player, you can't really do much from this distance. So hopefully you take note and you see these grapple points hanging around. And you can't stay on one for very long because she'll shoot you down. So what you basically got to do is you got to jump from each one to each and hit her in the middle, just like that. And eventually you'll get her to a little stunned state, whereas you can jump here and take her out. We've been working on this for a couple months now. We're starting to see how it's going to be and how fun it's going to be. And hopefully everybody else will think it's fun too.
You do not defy fate, Kratos!
This is our wireless technology, the Sony wireless controller. We actually just took a controller and cut off the cord. We use this for when we're planning out the button mapping in order to make the controls feel as efficient and as sort of thoughtless for the player as possible. It's natural in one sense because we're always using the L1 for a shift. Mm-hmm. So we just explain it in the shift mechanic of L1 plus R1. L1 and R2 is what Amulet of the Fates used to be. And it's a very awkward button combination for people, so now we've moved it to just R2. You turn it on, you turn it off, single button activation. And then we've taken the sub-weapons, which used to be just on R2, and we've turned that into an L1 plus R1 combination. The balance between the L1 and the face buttons being on opposite hands, I think really helps people to be able to use it as kind of a shift functionality. L1. So it's not that bad. This is the kind of stuff where we've been toiling over this for probably about 3 months. We've gone through so many different control schemes to maintain the really smooth, easy controls we had from the last game, but cram in 9 other features. We were already out of buttons from the last game, so it was very hard. Thank you, guys.
I plan and bring together all of the elements of what needs to happen for in-game animations. It's really all about going and working with the guys and making sure that they have what they need and that they're on the right track.
Pretty much everybody in the animation team, except for me, is new. So with that, you get a lot of fresh ideas. One of the things she does is when she's dealt enough damage to you, she can come off the pillars and just charge at you. And the idea behind this one was to have her, because she's so thick and bulky compared to the other Medusas, I figured I'd make her move more like an alligator. I figured that would be the most threatening creature that would come to mind. It also gives her a lot of character. A lot of people like when they see her get down like that and come at you, it's like, whoa, she's scary.
When they do it, you want them to be like, oh my God, you know, like that's the payoff for it all. The one that's always in the press, actually, is the Cyclops eye rip. This is what's in the game now. Hopefully it doesn't change before the end of the game. People love this move just because of the eye ripping part. It was that moment that people react to. I feel it. Sometimes I use video, like, I guess. This is embarrassing, but yeah, that's me. Sometimes you just gotta feel it out and get the motion, especially with stumbling and things that have more acting to them.
My favorite sequence is probably the Theseus one. During that sequence, Kratos throws his blade into Theseus, who's hanging off the ledge at this point. He pulls him down, and as coming down, he punches Theseus into the door, grabs Theseus' weapon, and then stabs him against the door. Then he grabs the key for the door from Theseus, and he puts the key into the lock. When the lock opens, Theseus slips to the floor, and then he makes one last effort to grab Kratos. And Kratos pulls away and stomps his head in between the door. And at this point in the game, you can mash the door into Theseus' head. So when it finally gets into the game, into like the final form, it's a relief because it's like, now I've finally finished, you know, and I can move on to the next thing.
Feel like I'm a little bit twisted. Yeah, coming up with different ideas, how to kill. How many ways can you kill someone? Originally, he was going to break his neck. I have an animation here. We had him jumping up on him and breaking his neck, and it just wasn't reading properly. It just didn't feel right, like Kratos. It wasn't brutal enough. So it was changed to this one.
Being new here, this was my very first full character that I got to do. He's seen around the world, and you fight him in a lot of battles. Sometimes you find multiple ones, which is really tough. This is just the actual CS move where Kratos grabs the Minotaur's weapon and actually uses it against him to impale him and kill him. What we were working on was trying to make the Minotaur react like he would, like a beast or creature would. You know, anytime he gets hit, he's growling back at you and he's reacting to what Kratos is doing. The other challenge is in the middle of this anim, there's a struggle minigame where it stops and the player has to mash on the button to impale him. And that's actually pretty difficult. You know, it seems like it's just a two-pose off thing, but I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that when he's pulling, you know, the strength of Kratos feels good. You know, the character responding and trying to pull back feels correct. And we're still working on it. It's not completely final yet, but a couple more passes and I think we'll be there.
The windmill magic is one of the new magics for this game. If I was to compare it to one of the magics in the first game, I guess it would be more like the Zeus lightning bolt, which allowed the player to reach enemies that were out of range. This is an example of one of the special moves that he can do with the bow. As you can see here, the bow seems kind of thick. Since it's made out of wind, the artists have actually created the animation within the bow. There's some textures here that actually animate and flow. Then once this gets into the game, you don't actually see the thickness. You only see this kind of translucent wind and air flowing through. So it's a really cool idea that the concept artist came up with. And the only solid part on the wind bow is this face right here. One of the special moves that are done with the wind bow, as you can see here, Kratos is just madly shooting arrows all over the ground in the circle, and it creates this huge tornado, which is quite cool in the game. You can definitely damage a lot of enemies. We try to, make him vicious, make every move that he does fit his character, his brutality. Definitely, that's definitely what we try to go for, but without trying to, hopefully people won't think that we're crazy.
Anytime the player loses control of the game, we cut away to either what we call an in-game cinematic, which is rendered in the game engine, or you cut away to a high-res cinematic.
The biggest challenge would be just trying to make it as seamless as possible, like from actual gameplay to cinematics.
I provide the connection between all of the different departments that touch cinematics. It hasn't changed the end pose, right? Correct. It requires constant emails, phone calls, making sure that everybody's on the same page with the script, any dialogue changes, Corey's new wishes, music, sound effects, the whole 9 yards. We have about 42 cinematics ranging in length between 20 seconds and 3.5 minutes. So getting all of those to the level of a AAA title takes a little bit of coordination.
In-game cinematics are the cinematics that are run through the actual game engine. In other words, these cinematics have to use game assets, the same characters, the same environments, the same lighting.
Mostly I do in-game cinematics. What I'm going to show you is a cut between combat move to the next gameplay. And right now it's a very raw stage wherein there's no special effects, no particles, and no ambient sound. The challenges of this cut scene is just to convey Kratos' anger because he thought he already killed Colossus when actually he hasn't. So he's thrown into this water level. This is one of those cinematics that doesn't involve any dialogue or voiceover. It's pure cutscene.
By the way, just for the record, this is how I come to work every day. Each character has these controls by which we can move them. We have a timeline, so basically what we're doing is we're posing the character on certain keyframes, and then when you play it back, you actually get the animation. It's exciting to be doing this. It's the funnest job, it's the best job, and I love it. I don't know, I just love doing it.
The most satisfying thing is when I really can take all of these pieces that exist already, some of the ones that I've had to make myself, and put them together and everything just clicks. This is a movie called Blade Offer 05. It's when Zeus gives you the Sword of Olympus. So what I needed to do was recreate roads. I used a lot of these pieces that had been built already, and then I had to build a few of the things myself, like this top stuff that you don't actually see in the game. Here's Kratos doing his thing. I had to put in all these sprites of clouds that they look strange here, but they render out correctly. Zeus opens the clouds and shows this light down, and here comes the Blade of Olympus. Comes down and there's these dust clouds, and then there's this little crack that pops up. I send all the information over to our dev kit that then builds everything.
I offer you the Blade of Olympus.
The high-res cinematics are cinematics that are pre-rendered. They don't have to go through the game engine at all. They can use any type of effects, any type of models, any type of lighting, whatever to make it beautiful. So the high-res cinematics may be more similar to an actual film. For the high-res cinematics, we start with a storyboard, and we make sure to test all of our shots, test our ideas here on paper before doing anything in CG land. From the storyboards, we outline our moves, get our actors together, our mocap actors, go down to the facility, do the shoot. This is a photo from one of our shoots. Me and two of the actors. I handled directing the actors. Everyone was suited up. You have to start in a T stance, and the cameras rotate around so that you can calibrate all the different markers that are on the character. Each marker is connected by a line. Think of a dot to dot that we've all done as little kids. It kind of looks like that. After the shoot, this is what we get back, which is actually Rhea that you saw. She's holding a baby that she doesn't want to give away, but her husband Kronos has been eating all of the babies, so the only way for the baby to live is if she gives the baby away, and this is the final goodbye. This is all raw mocap data with no cleanup, no hair, and a temporary model. We send the data to an external studio. External studio starts to build the cameras, put the characters in front of the cameras, building shots and timing, and the external studio places that data into a scene with their high-res set and their cameras. They also put it on a model that they've built high-res that's gone through an approval process here. And then on top of that, they're of course building models and environments and textures and lighting. And this is the exciting part. This is what we're just starting to get back now.
But when the time came for the last of her children to be eaten, she was unable to bear another such loss, and devised a trick to save the baby Zeus.
There are a lot of mistakes, a lot of clipping issues. It's first pass cloth, it's first pass hair. All of the scenes are not rendered, but this is the first renders that we've seen. Now, over the course of the next few weeks, we will spend our time giving revisions back to the external studio so that everything can be brought to final. It's going to be great once it all comes together.
Rhea commanded the eagle to secret her son away. He was taken to an island well beyond the watchful eyes of Kronos.
So I'm Stig, art director on God of War 2. We had developed, only 3 bosses in the last game, so we came out with this one with a goal of, trying to multiply that by 5. It seemed like at first. Icarus was an interesting boss too because it was, just trying to bring this almost like Aqualung, Jethro Tull type. Old, disgusting man and making him just look as crazy and evil as possible, but at the same time, there's a little bit of comedy to his character, as well as the Fat Medusa. I mean, obviously, she's grotesque and she feels very much like she's part of the same family as Sister 3, which is another one of these giant grotesque beasts. Sister 3 had to, very challenging character, we had to make sure that all of the stuff that was coming through in the concept, all the threads, the fat, the grotesque pus and pimples, and we could pull that off in 3D. And there was a lot of back and forth going between concept and the final product. And we ended up pretty much all of the boss characters that we originally concept, we ended up creating for the game, which is pretty impressive.